Hello, it's me, Christine. Welcome to my little crime corner. My eye is looking back to normal, just in time for our new case today. Let's get into it. On August 24th, 1982, a couple was searching for mushrooms in Gambrel State Park, which is a state park in Frederick, Maryland. This is a popular and scenic park about 50 miles northwest of Washington, D.C. The couple had been in the park for a while, searching through the leaf-covered grounds of the park, and made a shocking discovery. They found what appeared to be an old footlocker-style trunk that had obviously been attempted to conceal with leaves and branches. When the couple cleared away the leaves and branches, they discovered what appeared to be the skeletal remains of a young woman. They found no clothing or any personal items around her, just a dark-colored towel. I know what you're thinking. Why is it always the mushroom forgers? The couple then called police, and the remains were transferred to an anthropologist to be examined. The forensic anthropologist, named Dr. J. Lawrence Angel, had determined that the young woman was somewhere between 5'2" and 5'6" inches tall. Based on her skeletal structure, he had determined that she was Caucasian and may have been between the ages of 17 and 27, but she may have actually been as old as 45, which, wow, that is a broad spectrum. But the state of decomposition, and because her bones were exposed to the elements for so long, and the effects of scavenging from animals, made it exceedingly difficult to narrow in more on her age. You're probably wondering, if she was in a trunk, how did animals get to her? As far as I was able to tell, the trunk was not locked, the lid was just closed. I don't believe the hikers had to pry anything or break any locks to get it open. He also found that she had different styles of dental work done, which indicated that she might have actually gone to dental schools in order to have this work done. There was evidence that she had 2 crowns on her left front teeth, a root canal, and several fillings, some consistent with those performed by dental students. While examining her bones, the anthropologist found that there was significant wear on her pelvis, and it was determined that she had spondylolsis, which could have been something that she was born with, or could have been caused by multiple stress fractures to her lumbar vertebrae. Her exact cause of death could not be determined, but there were signs of strangulation. There were bones at the base of her skull that connect to the jaw that were broken, and one of her vertebrae in her upper neck was darkened by blood, but there is a possibility that this could have occurred post-mortem. Because of how she was found in the trunk, her death was ruled a homicide. It was difficult to pinpoint her exact time of death because of her condition, and experts had estimated that her death occurred sometime between 1972 and 1982, which again, wow, what a wide window. They thought that because of her distinguishing features and the coverage of the discovery, there would have been someone to come forward and identify this woman. Months and months passed, and she was compared to several known missing persons. Tips were called in and investigated, but really, nothing solid came from any of them. At one point, there was a promising lead, where a woman had matched her description, but the woman turned out to be someone else found deceased from a neighboring city. There were 2 composite sketches released to the media, and still nothing. The mystery of her identity continued. As I mentioned, because of the broad window of her time of death, her age remained a mystery. She could have been in her 40s at her time of death, but some wondered if she was much younger. We know her bones showed signs of spondylolsis, so could she have perhaps been a gymnast or a dancer? The stress on her bones had shown that this was more likely to have been caused by long-term strain rather than something she was born with, which was still a possibility. It is clear that prior to her death, she had led an active lifestyle and participated in some type of sport. Because of this, in combination with her estimated height and suspected age, she became known as the cheerleader in the trunk. This referral ended up drawing more and more attention to the case, which was a good thing. Investigators began receiving tips from people who called in about missing girls, mostly teens, who were known to be associated with gymnastics, cheerleading, and dance. Her feet had showed signs that she frequently wore high heels, and there was evidence that she had broken one of her big toes at some point in her life. Her skull had been characterized as having old American attributes, meaning there was most likely at least 3 generations of her family in the United States, as opposed to European characteristics who had more recently immigrated. That's not to say that there is no chance she could have been born somewhere else. This is just what we know based on her bone structure. Although there was significant stress on her spine that was consistent with regular activity or playing a sport, her bones did not show signs of being muscled, indicating that she was probably more of a slim or lean body type. There was also the theory that she was an equestrian. Because horseback riding is such an intense sport, some people thought that the stress on her skeletal system could have come from years of riding. Experts confirmed that this type of wear would be more concentrated in her hips and lower back, which is exactly where the damage was in our victim. This possibility was called into question by the anthropologist, since, as we previously mentioned, there was evidence that she wore high heels a lot, and frequent wear of high heels changes the bone structure of the feet, because high heels shorten the Achilles tendon. Apparently, horseback riding does the opposite. Because equestrians typically need to put their heels down in the stirrups, their Achilles tendons are usually longer than the average person's, so this could have ruled her out as a horseback rider since her feet did not match. Because of all the media coverage up to this point, and the fact that no one had come forward to identify her, it was thought that it is possible that this young woman was a runaway. She may not have had a stable home life or anyone looking out for her who might have reported her missing. There was a surge of interest around the case in 2018, where several web sleuths, or as I like to call them, independent investigators, would look into the case and establish the idea that the cheerleader in the trunk was not a runaway at all, but a girl who lived a life of luxury. This isn't to say that people living a luxurious life would never run away. You never know someone's circumstances, and you never know what someone may be going through. But based on this theory, people began thinking that she must have had a loving family to take her to dance practice or another sporting event. There was also the theory that she had been an exotic dancer who might have been estranged from her family and was working her way through dental school. You know, based on the inconsistent dental work. Because her bones indicated such wear as someone who was participating in a sport, many people agree that she most likely participated in dance, gymnastics, figure skating, or horseback riding, all of which were expensive to do regularly. She would have also had to have done one or more for several years in order to generate this much skeletal damage. Because of this, it was thought that she had come from a wealthy family. Another point that I found to be very profound is that regardless of the quality of the dental work, a transient individual usually does not have extensive dental work. This would point to that at some point in her life, she was in the position where she had access and was financially stable enough to have work done. As time went on, additional composite sketches were created and distributed. One sketch drawn by a police officer in 2012 had drawn her with a larger, more elongated nose and her hair in a ponytail. A blogger had also created one after seeing a picture of her skull online, and it was exceptionally realistic and looked like a photograph. Even after all this, the new tips garnered did not lead investigators any closer to her identity. After her case was reviewed by the Center for Missing and Exploited Children in 2020, investigators now believe that she was closer to 27 years old. Along with this determination, they also released an updated composite sketch where she is depicted more accurately to this age. I know there was a lot of attention surrounding the cheerleader idea, but as time went on, many people began to wonder if she was a cheerleader at all. After learning about this case, many people deduced that cheerleaders will typically have a social circle both during and outside of sporting events. So if all of a sudden a member of the group wasn't there, someone would surely notice. If she was in her teens, someone like a parent would surely know that their child is missing. Someone who saw her regularly, like a teacher or a boss, would notice if she didn't come in to school or work. At the time of her discovery, it was concluded, based on the forensic evidence, that she was likely to have been deceased for at least 3 years, meaning it was very likely that her death had occurred pretty close to 1979. In 1979, cheerleading really wasn't what it is today in terms of mainstream competition wise. It was more restricted to high school basketball games as opposed to national competitions. It was established that if she was an active participant in the sport, she would have had teammates who would have noticed she wasn't there and reported her missing. If not her teammates, perhaps a coach, or someone else from the school. No such report was made, leading people to believe she was an active young woman in her mid-20s that had a history of participating in an activity like gymnastics or dance. It was noted that she most likely was not from Maryland, where she was discovered, since no one in the area recognized her, and she didn't match any missing persons report from the state. However, there is always the possibility that she could have been a runaway who had cut ties with her family. She may not have been around for them to report her missing. In 2012, another composite sketch was released of the woman in the trunk. This composite showed a younger woman in her mid-20s, unlike the 1983 composite, which attempted to show her as an older woman. This new composite didn't lead to any credible tips. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children then decided to take up the case and attempted to extract DNA from her remains, but unfortunately, there was not enough material to be extracted and tested. Her dental records are what I believe to be the best chance of finding out who she is. Later on in 2020, the local authorities teamed up with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, where they released yet another composite image depicting her as being between 17 and 27, as they believe this is a much more accurate range of how old she was when she died. At this time, investigators believed that it was extremely unlikely that she was in her 30s to 40s when she died. They are also much more confident that her death occurred sometime between 1979 and 1982, including as recently as 1982, which would have eliminated possible victims in the previous 7 years. I'm hoping that this more narrow range leads investigators closer. Of the several suspected victims, there are 2 young women that investigators found to be strong possibilities. One of them being a 22-year-old woman named Virginia Welch. Virginia, who sometimes went by Jenny, had just moved to Roanoke, Virginia, and moved in with a new roommate. Virginia matched the characteristics of the cheerleader in terms of height, body type, and suspected hair color. She had several tattoos, including a rose on her arm, a hummingbird on her chest, wings on her shoulder, a cobra on her hip, and a Confederate flag with the words, "Live to ride, ride to live." Several years before Virginia's disappearance, she had enlisted in the U.S. Army, but was discharged for a medical issue after just a few months. She had a boyfriend at the time who was involved with a motorcycle gang called the Pagans, and police noted that she had disappeared just after several members of the gang were arrested during a drug raid. There was suspicion that she might have been a federal informant. It was revealed that Virginia had a history of engaging in drug activity to support herself, and later told her mother that she was in too deep. She said there was a wooden box with a padlock on it that contained a letter that would explain everything if anything were to happen to her. Her mother had not heard from her in almost 3 weeks, so she called and ended up speaking with Virginia's roommate, who said she had left and didn't know when exactly, and didn't know where she was. He said that she had left the apartment carrying a plastic bag and had just never returned. When police began investigating Virginia's disappearance, her mother went to open the locked wooden box and discovered that it had been broken into and the letter was missing. The police had ruled Virginia's roommate out as a suspect in her disappearance, but her sister believes that he might have been involved as his story carried several inconsistencies. This is bananas suspicious, and I would like someone to investigate further. Her case today remains unsolved. Another possibility is a 25-year-old woman named Anne Riggin, who went missing from her home in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania on May 28, 1982. Anne also had characteristics matching that of the cheerleader, including brown wavy hair and a similar height and frame. Anne, who often went by Annie, has a scar above her left eye and had previously fractured her collarbone. There isn't a lot of information that I found about Anne. I did find contradictory information regarding matching possible dental records with Anne, as well as the fact that her collarbone fracture might or might not have been evident on bones many years later based on the severity of the fracture and an individual's ability to heal. As far as I am aware, both women are currently still missing, and neither has been officially ruled out as the cheerleader. Because her death was considered a homicide, as we know, she was found in the trunk. It is thought that she was possibly hitchhiking and was killed by a truck driver. Other people, including me, believe she was killed by someone she knew, since they went through the trouble of putting her in this cumbersome and heavy trunk and schlepping it out to the woods. But this is just my opinion based on how little we know. But I want to know what you think. I do feel like we see advancements in technology daily, and there's no reason that she one day can't be identified. I do in my heart believe that one day she will get justice. I do also hope that one day we do get justice for Virginia and Anne. They deserve it too. Such a sad, tragic case that, again, I'm sorry, has no resolution, at least not at this time. But there is always hope. And that is all I have for you today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.